Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. And I want to thank FOSI for inviting us to do this project this year. We really, really appreciate that. And I'd also like to extend a warm thank you to Emily Mulder, who was terrific in providing lots of guidance and was very patient with us as we were working through all of the details on the project. It was terrific, and we are very, very excited to be able to, tackle showing you all of these interesting results. First of all, as many of you may already know, this project builds off and contributes to FOSI's history of doing really interesting and original research. Overall, we sought to explore the attitudes and behaviors of young people, in particular Gen Z, regarding online safety issues. And before I get into the details of this, I want to go through some of the basic methodological housekeeping that we always do. We did two phases to the research. Initially, we conducted a qualitative phase, which my colleague Jessica, who's standing by, will shortly talk about. And then we did a quantitative survey later in the summer. The qualitative research involved a detailed online bulletin board spread out over 3 days. This involved a total of 24 people. Half of them were teenagers aged 13 to 17, and the other half were young adults aged 18 to 24. That was done towards the end of June. And the results of that survey, that research, that online bulletin board really helped us become current, if you will, with what was on the minds of Gen Z, the teenagers, the young adults. It helped inform our design of the quantitative survey. So it was extremely useful setting the stage for the quantitative survey, which we did in August. And that was a quantitative survey of 1,000 Gen Z, again split half and half among teenagers, so 500 teenagers and 500 young adults. And then at the same time, or a little bit later in the month, we did a companion piece among parents. It wasn't as comprehensive, but we did just over 500 parents of children who were online. And as you can see, we tackled a number of different topics in the survey, ranging from attitudes and emotions and experiences and knowledge about online concerns and online safety issues. We explored different experiences and their expectations towards the internet and technology and social media. We also certainly probed level of responsibility on the part of the Gen Z about their online behaviors and whether that extended to personal responsibilities. And we explored the concept of digital citizenship. But before we get into some of the quantitative details, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Jessica to walk us through the qualitative research, which was really, really interesting.
Thanks, David. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's listening in, and thanks for taking the time to be here. Here's a look at some of the Gen Z participants that I had the pleasure of learning from during the qualitative phase of research. As David mentioned, we talked to teens and young adults in an online bulletin board setting, and they were full of great insights and ideas for us. So here's what we heard. We really heard that Gen Z embraces technology. They live in a world where they're digital natives, and you know that. They daily feel confident and view their online world really as a positive space, as an extension and integral part of their real life. We asked Gen Z participants about kindness versus unkind behavior online, and we heard the 80-20 rule come out pretty clearly. So we heard Gen Z respondents tell us, 80% of the activity I see online is kind and positive. And then there's maybe a 20% where I feel a little bit uncomfortable. But Gen Z is using online platforms and apps in the digital world for so many different things, for connection, for entertainment, for learning, for gaming. You can just get a sense of them living in this world that is really, really rich for them. However, what we did uncover is that there's still a little feeling of discomfort, right? Most don't feel completely safe online, but their concerns were a little bit different than what we imagined, at least top of mind. Top of mind, they're really very interested in sort of personal safety, password protection, data protection, hackers, avoiding scams, identity theft, things like that. Those were top of mind for Gen Z, because sadly, what we heard is that they've come to expect and sort of accept some of the negative behavior they see in other spaces online, but they are very, very concerned about their personal safety. So they go to great lengths, really, to curate their personal world. What we heard pretty clearly was, hey, there's a disconnect between my personal online world and the wider world. Really, social media being perceived as a bigger threat to others than to self. So what they've done is really taken their personal online space and curated it, right? So that in their world, there's fun and interaction, there's content that they've chosen, there's independence, there's the ability to be social. But when we zoomed out to the larger social media and online world is where we started to see some negativity and feeling a little overwhelmed, sometimes realizing maybe I'm more influenced than I should be by the online world. And that played out also in the quantitative research that came after the qualitative. We saw that social media for a majority of Gen Zers really they feel like it has a negative impact on society, that has a negative impact sort of on their peers, and then less of a negative impact on themselves in their perception. So what they see is, hey, that wider world has some negativity, some hateful comments. We heard a lot about hateful comments. We heard a lot about racism, bullying, misinformation, and disinformation that Stephen mentioned earlier. So we took that and we wanted to dig a little bit deeper with Gen Z and figure out what's going on in that online world that's maybe stopping them from addressing some of the negativity that they see. And we heard kind of two big factors come out when it comes to that. What's contributing to this sense that there's this greater, larger online world that's pretty negative for them, that they don't feel like they have a ton of control over. So they've curated their personal space, but when it comes to the larger world, they sort of feel like I don't have a lot of control. What we heard were two things. First is that there are real world consequences to some of the choices they make online, right? So they feel like if maybe they report someone or block someone or leave a group chat or leave a conversation, there is a fear of being ostracized. There's a fear of offending maybe someone that they know, a peer or a friend. And so what we heard really quickly was, hey, if I just mute someone, I know it doesn't really solve the problem, the root of the problem, but it's a way to quickly silence someone and maybe not really lose the friendship or lose the social interaction that they're having there. On the flip side, we heard, what's the point of maybe reporting someone or taking action? Gen Zers pretty clearly told us that unless it's a very, very serious issue, they mostly believe that platforms don't always take action. They believe that reporting tools can be intimidating, sometimes confusing, sometimes cumbersome. And what they're seeing, their perception was that they are not seeing a ton of follow through from the online platforms when they do report or when they do mention an issue. They feel like the problem is just bigger than them. So why bother? the last thing that we dug into with Gen Z was this idea of digital citizenship. And interestingly, when we presented Gen Z participants with the idea and the concept of digital citizenship, they weren't really familiar with the formal definition of digital citizenship that we provided. But once they understood the concept, they were very, very open to it. They thought, that's really cool. We got a lot of comments like, hey, that's cool. I hadn't heard about that before. They really embrace the idea of digital citizenship, but they do see it as a shared responsibility. And they were very clear in saying, hey, users of social media, of online platforms, we have the responsibility to treat each other with respect, to sort of follow the rules of engagement. But platforms really have the responsibility of clearly saying, here are our rules of engagement. We want to create a positive environment, and we will follow through with negative consequences if someone doesn't follow those rules of engagement. And so that the concept of digital citizenship was one that was very important overall to Gen Z. We saw that also play out in the quantitative research, but they need a little help getting there. They want to participate in digital citizenship is what we heard from them. They want to be good digital citizens, but they also need platforms to provide the tools and the resources and to close the loop when there are negative conversations happening, negative comments happening. So that's kind of what we heard from the qualitative phase very quickly. It was 3 days of talking to a lot of Gen Z respondents. So I will pepper in a few comments throughout the rest of the presentation to let you know what we heard qualitatively. But David's here to take you through some of the attitudes that we uncovered in the quantitative research and some of the usage, and just dive a little bit deeper into some of the topics we've talked about so far.
Thanks, Jess. I really appreciate that. I hope all of you found that very, very useful. To just get started with the quantitative research recap, I thought it might be helpful to provide a bit of a bit of background information. Perhaps this won't be terribly a surprise to all of you, but Gen Zers, our teenagers, our young adults spend a lot of time online. They are almost universally eager to launch new technology and the impact that it will have on the future. But at the same time, most characterize their generation as being actually too hooked on technology. The majority admits that social media consumes too much of their time, and they acknowledge the need to unplug every so often. We know that the majority of Gen Z has a significant social media presence. Nearly all of them, 87%, say they've used social media in the past 3 months, or an average of about 4 hours a day for teens, increasing to 5 hours. And nearly 3/4 of these social media users describe themselves as engaged. But as you can see, and again, it may not be terribly surprising to all of you, nearly all of Gen Z, 89%, looking at the left side, say they like social media. And further, very large majorities, clear majorities, indicate that the online content and their personal interactions are positive. Though we start to see some nuance in these views, and this nuance is something that we will see throughout the results of the quantitative survey. About half say their interactions are somewhat positive. We see throughout the research that while Gen Z is fairly upbeat and positive about using technology and social media, they recognize that it's not a perfect world. And you can see this we start to uncover the level of uncomfortableness, if that's a word. Our Gen Z group acknowledges being uncomfortable. Looking at the left side, 66%, 2/3, agree that they are uncomfortable at least some of the time on social media, and that over half, 55%, are not comfortable with the level of information that is available about themselves online. So this leads us to looking at online safety and individual actions. So we understand that the Gen Z have overall positive sentiments and attitudes about social media, but certainly at the same time express some level of discomfort. So how are they coping with online safety and the actions that they are taking? Very broadly, looking at the left side first, 8 in 10, 83% say they feel safe online. However, only 18%, just under 1 in 5, feel very safe. Further, when we ask about their overall assessment of their risk, about half still believes their online safety is at risk to a varying degree. And yet, as we continue, there is an overall awareness of the importance of being able to manage their online safety. 86% say it's important overall, and 53% say it's very important. They even feel confident to a certain extent that they can keep themselves safe. 84% feel that way. However, many, about half, when you look at the center graphic here, feel that the effort to manage their personal online safety is overwhelming. And quite a significant number don't feel they have access to the resources they need to manage their personal online safety.
You know, David, I'm going to jump in, David, for a sec. In the qualitative, what we heard from Gen Z respondents was, I know I should do it, but sometimes it becomes a little cumbersome. Sometimes I don't know where the tools are. I'm not sure exactly how they work. I forget to use them. So it's sort of something that they need to be reminded of and brought to their attention over and over again. And you'll see later on, they really want safety tools to be very streamlined, easy to understand, and very easy to access.
Yes, and for many Gen Z, again, about half of them, they are more concerned about their personal safety rather than the safety of their data. And by personal safety, I think it's important to just mention that we had defined that to be their mental health and issues of harassment. Here is some data that we find particularly interesting. There's a really curious but interesting set of social dynamics at play here. A clear majority of Gen Z, 2/3, are more inclined to take action against bad behavior when it's happening to others as compared to bad behavior that may be happening to themselves. And many, about 1/3, 34%, worry what others, their friends, might think if they take actions against bad behavior on social media. So on the one hand, Gen Z acknowledge to us that the bad behavior exists and that they need to worry about it. But at the same time, many aren't quite sure how to manage this behavior vis-a-vis their own personal interactions. And now we'd like to turn to some of the data that we collected on attitudes about the actions taken by the social media companies. And what we find here is Gen Z generation, for the most part, feel that the social media platforms do a good job with their personal data. 59% feel that way. And further, they trust the companies being responsible with their personal data. Again, about 60%. However, at the same time, and this is important, almost 8 in 10 perceive that the social media companies don't do enough to punish those users that abuse the platform, such as the predators, bullies, and scammers. And about a third of the Gen Z generation strongly feels this way. So now turning to the safety tools themselves, specifically, we find that just over half of Gen Z, 56%, are aware of these safety tools. Of course, this means that a considerable number, 44%, are not aware. But among those who are aware of the tools, a clear majority of them are 7 in 10, are at least somewhat satisfied with these tools. It's worth noting that about 1 in 5 are very satisfied. And Jess, I guess as it relates to these tools, we have a brief little video here that we wanted to share with everyone, right?
We do. And I think before we get to the video, what we heard very clearly is when we asked Gen Z for their wish list on tools, what do you wish was out there to help keep you safe online? Many of the things they mentioned already exist. Many of the tools that they said, it'd be great if this was clearer, if it was easier to make my account private, if someone could monitor this, if there could be people monitoring for negativity and negative comments. A lot of those tools are already available. So I know as we were going through the research, folks were like, but that's already out there. They're not using it. They don't recognize that it's there. In some cases, it's not clear enough and it's not easy enough to access. And I think we'll hear from a Gen Z participant in our bulletin board right now, and she'll give you a sense of that dynamic.
When it comes to the future of internet safety, I can't really think of any specific tools that I think are missing. I think if I was presented with a good potential tool, I might think it would work, but I don't really have any ideas for a lot of specific tools. But what I would like to see is greater awareness of online safety tools. So maybe rather than make new tools, we could just refine the ones that we already have with any problems that they have. And I think the biggest problem that I think of is just people not knowing about it and not using it, or maybe the tool seeming too intimidating so they don't want to use it, and then they land up not protecting themselves when they could have. So that's what I'd like to see for the future, is just like more time spent pushing these tools to people, educating them about them, and making them as accessible as possible.
So the tools are there, and how do we get the word out about some of those tools to help keep themselves and others safe online?
So we wanted to also look at the role and responsibility of parents in this in the world of internet and social media, and how they are helping their children navigate this. And of course, the main focus of the research was Gen Z. But as I mentioned earlier, we did do a very brief companion survey of parents, and among these are parents with children online. And this allowed us to do some comparisons between the parent sample and the Gen Z. And here's what we found. Both Gen Z and parents agree that right now, parents are less online savvy than young folks. 3/4 of Gen Z feel this way. Half of parents believe that the children are teaching the parents more about online safety. And 6 in 10 Gen Z believe that the children are doing the same, that are teaching the parents more about online as well.
What we did hear from Gen Zers when we talked to them is that their parents had done earlier on, for the teens in the present and for the young adults a little earlier on, a very good job of setting the foundation of, you have to be safe online. You have to be concerned about others. You have to watch and be proactive about maintaining your safety. But where the gap was is that the parents were not as familiar with all of the different platforms and tools, so hadn't really had the opportunity to teach their children specific action that they could take. It was more of a general, like, stay safe online, be careful, watch out for who you talk to. So they had done a good job of setting the foundation, but really didn't have the tools to follow through with specifics per platform. That's what we heard from our Gen Z respondents. I think it plays out here as well.
Yes, and everyone agrees that of the importance in parents' role in teaching their children about online safety. Parents are seen as the most relied upon source among young people, especially the teens. And almost all parents, 91%, feel they should have the primary responsibility to teach their children about online safety. Now, when it comes to trusting social media companies with their children's personal safety, the parents are a bit torn. Half feel they can trust the companies. Of course, this means the other half aren't as trusting. Further, while many parents, about 6 in 10, express some satisfaction with the online safety tools, a quarter are very satisfied and 15% are not as satisfied. Most are somewhere in the middle. And finally, as we get near the end of the presentation here, the parents are asking for help. Half, 55%, find the process of managing their personal online safety to be overwhelming. And similarly, half also believe they don't have enough information to manage their children's personal online safety. And 62%, so over 6 in 10, feel they aren't able to keep up with all the changes that are online. We found similar perspective from the Gen Z as well. Half of Gen Z also said that managing their online safety to be overwhelming, and 42% feel they don't have the resources.
One of the things we heard from Gen Z is that there's no consolidated central space to understand all of the tools. Tools are different per platform, per app, per social media site. And so they were like, every single interaction is a different way that I need to manage my safety. It'd be cool if there was some consistency. It'd be cool if there was a central place that I could sort of learn about those online safety tools so that I wouldn't have to sort of recreate the process every single time and every single place I touch. I don't know if we asked parents about that, David, but I would venture a guess that that would be something appealing to parents as well.
Yes, I agree. So just in wrapping things up here and in summary, I wanted to just highlight a few things. We believe that this new research helps to convey the relationship between Gen Z and technology and social media. And as they say these days, it's complicated. Gen Z certainly acknowledges the positives, but there is a bit of a disconnect between their own fairly positive experiences and the bigger picture of the digital world around them. Gen Z wants and is very capable to make the online world a better and safer place, though encouraging them to protect themselves can be tricky. The social dynamics of being a young person come into play. They are willing to call out concerns, issues of concern to others and to society, but not always about themselves and to themselves. There is a recognition of the effort and measure of satisfaction of the social media platforms and what they are doing to make users feel safe. However, Gen Z tells us that they are certainly looking for improvement as well. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank FOSI for asking us to do this research. There is a full summary report, which I hope that all of you will be able to look at and digest. It's chock full of lots more details. And we really appreciate and thank you all for bearing with us for this. Thank you.
you.
Enjoy the conference.